When and where were you born?
I was born on the 19th of March in 1888. I spent my childhood in the industrial area of Westphalia in Germany. There were mines, furnaces, and metal melting there. It was very loud, very dirty, and unpleasantly ugly.
What kind of upbringing did you have?
I never painted at all in my childhood, but I did always look up to my father, who was a house painter and a decorative painter. He made stage sets and glass paintings. I spent my childhood in his workshop watching him. Both of my parents come from a very craftsman background. My father's parents were carpenters. They were also builders partly, and several of them were very active in the theatre. On my mother's side, there was much more heavy craft. They were blacksmiths and made a speciality horseshoes and nails for them. So as a child, my main fun was to watch others working.
How old are you at the start of the First World War, and what were you doing before the outbreak?
In 1905, I began my studies to become a teacher for 3 years in Buren. I then worked as a primary school teacher in Westphalia primary schools from 1908 to 1913, teaching everything from gymnastics to reading, writing and arithmetic. So in those 5 years I collected a little money so I could afford to go to Berlin and study. I was 26 when the war began.
What did you do during the Great War?
I became a student at the Royal School of Art in 1913 in Berlin. But it was my family that wanted me to be a teacher. That was safe, you see. To be a painter was terrible at the time. I wanted to quit on many occasions, but my parents just got mad at me. I finished it 2 years later. In 1915, I made my examinations and became a certified art teacher. Over the next few years whilst teaching, I developed more as an artist and printmaker. I decided to further my studies in Essen, where I did a course in lithography. After that, I went on to study at the Royal Bavarian Art Academy in Munich, where I attended the drawing course for the Franz Stuck and Max Dorner course in painting techniques.
Where were you when the war ended, and what were you doing?
I received my first public commission in 1918, which was a stained glass window for a church in Essen. In 1920, I travelled to Weimar to study at the Bauhaus. I had very little money, but that didn't disturb me. My aim was to continue to create glass paintings, so I felt I had to go to the Bauhaus to the course that was given to me by Itten.
What are your memories of the Bauhaus as a student?
I have not the best memories of my studies there. When the course was over, all students had to exhibit their work and then it was decided whether or not one could continue their studies. I was accepted to continue. I wished to go into a workshop to make stained glass. That was my dream. Glass pictures. Itten thought I wasn't ready for that and that I should attend the wall painting workshop first. I thought that was nonsense and said, painting has nothing to do with reflected light and glass painting with direct light. So it was then that I decided to carry on doing stuff on my own. I had no money. All I had was a rucksack and a hammer, but that didn't stop me. I started on my assemblages in 1921.
What did you do in the years following the end of the war?
I started running the glass workshop at the Bauhaus in 1921. Groupier started persuading me to start teaching in handicraft at the school when Itten left in 1923. I told him, when I left school, I never intended on going back to teaching again, but he insisted. He said, do me a favour and start, and so I did. When the Bauhaus moved to Dessau in 1925, I became a professor, teaching alongside Paul Klee and Kandinsky. In addition to working in glass and metal, I began to design furniture and typography.
Who were your greatest artistic comrades in the years following World War I?
Paul Klee, Kandinsky and Schlemmer were one of the most important masters I had at the Bauhaus as a late student. I never studied with Klee or Kandinsky and never took their courses, but we were colleagues and good friends. I also co-taught with Lazio Mihaly Nagy at the Bauhaus once Jan's Itten had left.
What did you do in the years following the closure of the Bauhaus?
Due to the Nazi pressure, I was forced to leave Germany and emigrated to the United States. An architect called Philip Johnson, who was a creator at the Museum of Modern Art, offered me a job as a head of new art school called the Black Mountain College in North Carolina. In 1933, I joined the faculty of the college where I was head at the painting program until 1949. The following year, I left the school to head the Department of Design at Yale University, where I worked to expand the graphic design program. I worked there until I retired from teaching in 1958.
What are your key interests and how do they influence your artwork?
The square is the ideal shape for what I wanted to achieve in my work. Like in my homepages series, squares are mathematically related to each other inside, perfect for superimposition. The colours in the homepage series react with one another when processed by the human eye, causing optical illusions. I tried to execute these paintings with a careful technique using a minimum tools of paint. I hate chaos. Whilst working on the paintings, I applied one base and then squeezed unmixed paints directly from the tubes and spread the paint evenly as thin as possible with the palette knife.
What are your key works of art?
My book, Interaction of Colour, provides the analysis of the function and perception of the colour and profoundly influence art education and art practice, especially colour-filled painting and minimalism in the 20th century. The series homepage to the square took me the longest to develop. From 1949 until death in 1976, I used basic singular geometric shapes to explore a range of visual effects that could be achieved through colour and spatial relationships alone.
Which art movement did you feel most attached to during the 1920s?
Supermatism, Futurism, Constructivism, and of course, Bauhaus.
Who influenced you the most in your work as an artist?
Pierre Mondrian, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, Kazimir Malevich, to name a few artists. But also some of my friends like Kandinsky, Gropius, Paul Klee, and my wife, Annie Albers. They've all had a big influence on my work.
What would you say was one of your greatest achievements?
In 1962, I received a grant from the Graham Foundation for an exhibit and lecture on my work. In the same year, I also collaborated with King Louis, an architect, in creating decorative designs from some of his projects. Some of these were the geometric fireplaces for the Rouse 1954 and DuPont 1759 houses.
What will your legacy be?
In 1971, I founded the Josef and Annie Albers Foundation, which is a non-profit founded organisation. I hope that the organisation would further the revelation and evocation of vision through art. Today, my work is still represented in some of the world's best art museums, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York, Chicago Museum of Contemporary Art, Tate London, among others. My theories about art and colour are still powerful influences on a whole generation of artists.